Hi, this is Catherine, and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Jane's Garden Tea by Hardy & Sons, from Hardy & Sons, by at whereabouts, in an Austen mug, because I am corny, and this is my Jane Austen July TBR. I've been looking forward to this for so long, and I have had a recent downturn in mood, as it were, where my reading's been a little not great, my everything has not been great, and that is not surprising because lately it's not been a great time for anyone really. But I know this from last year and from every year that I've ever read a Jane Austen novel in the month of July, that there is nothing like Jane Austen to cheer me up. And a lot of people. I've read a lot of accounts of people at war or in other trying circumstances that read Jane Austen to help their outlook, mood, or just to be a distraction. So I loved Jane Austen July last year, full of all kinds of challenges, reading challenges. I think last year I made all of those challenges. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I did. And I was so proud of myself, and I even did extra credit. I kept reading books into August, and when I say extra credit, it wasn't, this is not school, but you know what I mean. Like I went further. I didn't stop with July. I went into August, and I might do that this year because I just love Jane Austen so much. It is my mood enhancer. And so here is my TBR. Now, in case you have not heard of Jane Austen July, in case you somehow came here first without having gone to any of the other channels, which would be surprising to me, Jane Austen July is a lovely readathon, read-along, reading initiative, and it is hosted by Katie from Books and Things and Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. It's a tongue twister for me. Blatantly Bookish, but I got it. Okay. Both great channels. Please see their channels. Please see their everything. And it is, the main requirement is just to read a book by Jane Austen. That's it. You have completed your challenge. Yay. But there are so many other challenges that you can partake in, and I am very up for it. And so the first thing is the first challenge is to read one of Jane Austen's 6 novels. And the hosts have also put together a read-along of 2 of her books, which last year I did. It was, I think last year was Sense and Sensibility and Northanger Abbey. And so, the first half of July you read one, and the last half, which was great. It's spaced out enough where you could really read it. And this year we've got Emma and Pride and Prejudice. So, you see it? Emma. Now, yes, these are 2 very different editions. The first half of the month is Emma, and I have this lovely collector's library from Barnes & Noble. At least this was here. It was a Barnes & Noble collection, and I really loved it. I don't know if it was entirely Barnes & Noble. Yes, it was, because it says Barnes & Noble books in here. I know in other places it wasn't Barnes & Noble, but anyway. At any rate, I did get a few books. I have Emma, Sense, Sensibility, and Persuasion in this form, and other forms of other books, because, heaven forbid I should be uniform. And Emma has the 2 distinctions of being my first Jane Austen and my least favorite Jane Austen of the 6 main novels, the big 6. But why? And that's funny because, when I say my least favorite, and I said this last year when I did my ranking, I may have to do a new ranking because things have changed in my estimation, but I don't mean that I don't like Emma. I think it's a great book. Obviously, if this was my first Jane Austen and I went really all in afterwards, I obviously like Emma. I just prefer the other ones. That might change it with a reread because I have, you can see it looks pretty pristine, right? You may think, oh, it doesn't look like you've read this book. Well, I have gone back to it after watching an adaptation, after being curious about a moment, if a book referred to something, and I'll just go in for a second and look for that passage. But not very much, because you could see that the actual bookmark is still in its original place, folded up the way they do it. So obviously I haven't done it that much. which means I really, really, really have to get back to Emma. I have not reread it in its entirety since 1993. And I know I've been a little off with my dates lately, and I will do another video about that sometime soon, I hope, because I found some of my reading journals, and it's really interesting to me. So it's time. I've seen so many adaptations. I do know the story almost inside and out, but I think I'm very happy that I'm doing this, and I'm not alone in doing this, so in rereading this book. So I'm quite excited about it. And, I mean, I have reread Pride and Prejudice a number of times. But when I say that, I don't think as many times as I say I do. My thing is that I could say I've reread it a few times, but not always officially, because I find myself, whereas with Emma, I will go back to a passage. With Pride and Prejudice, I'll just sit and read chapters at a time. And another time I want to read the last few chapters and the middle few chapters. So it's like I read this very often piecemeal. I have another copy of this book that's a big recipe book that I think I've shown here. But you know what? It's not really baking season for me. So this is a nice, very masterpiece theater copy, as I call it, if you've ever seen that show from the past. Anyway, I don't know if they have it outside the United States, but it was a great show that showed many adaptations of classics that I think got a lot of people into said classics. So, we've talked enough about that, although that is the main meat of it. Number 2 is read something by Jane Austen. That is not one of her main 6 novels. Last year, I think I read Love and Friendship, which was a roller coaster. This year, I plan to reread. When I say that, this is not me bragging. I'm pretty sure I have not read everything that Jane Austen ever wrote, but I've read most of what Jane Austen wrote that we have in publication. That's not a brag. It's not that there's so much of it, you know, but since I started reading Jane Austen in 1993, I've had plenty of time. I also started reading Bronte in the mid-90s, and I haven't read all of that, so I don't know what that says. But Lady Susan, I read probably about 20 years ago, and so I don't remember most of the details about Lady Susan. I've seen it reviewed since, so like it's jogged my memory a little bit. I know it's about a slightly older main character than Jane Austen usually has, so it may be worth a reread for me now, because I am now older than any Jane Austen character. I mean, main character. I'm probably around Mrs. Bennet's age. Oh my God. I think I'm actually older than Mrs. Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility, and quite a few of the Jane Austen parents I am probably older than at this point. Ouch. But anyway, we're not going to get into that. So this volume, going back into the do I really know what I'm talking about? I think I do, though. I bought also in 93, I think, with my very first paycheck ever. I was doing an internship that was a paid internship, but it was great because it was a good way to get started, work experience, all that stuff. I was a very, very shy, retiring 16-year-old, I think, when I started working. Don't do the math. And I mean, really, really, really shy and socially just inept. It was really good that I had a program through my school to start working in an office, because I don't know how I would have ever found a way of getting experience otherwise. And this is me going a little off topic just because I'm talking about myself, navel gazing once again. But it was a big thing for me because I went from knowing just almost nothing about life to working in Midtown in an office in a very big building. Not the biggest building, but even then, especially in 93, I did not want to work in one of the bigger buildings. Look up the history of things in 93 in New York, and you will know why. But this building, I think I worked on like the 11th floor, so it wasn't a big deal. It was right over Grand Central Terminal, which is a pretty well-known train station in New York. And again, very intimidating, but I got used to it. Who can really ever get used to such a crowded place? But the big draw to me was, besides the fact that, you know, I was really into certain music bands, whatever, and so there was a record store, at least one record store in there, so I could buy stuff like that with my newly found earnings, which weren't a lot, but still better than nothing. But there were 2 bookshops down there, and One of them was Barnes and Noble, which I bought quite a few things from there. I remember buying my first London map there. And the other one was what became, I don't know if it was at the time, but it became later, Postman, which is a small chain. And when I say chain, it's only a few locations. The one in Grand Central closed a few years ago. Very sad, but there are at least two others. And the one in, when it reopens, the one in Chelsea Market is fantastic, by the way. I have gone completely off topic. Anyway, the point is that this was the first actual Jane Austen book that I believe that I bought with my money, not checked out of a library. I think the second one was Northanger Abbey. I think. Same kind of book. I bought that in a Barnes & Noble. But, and then a couple of years after buying this, I actually read it, because I always had that problem where I take books out of the library and not, read the books that I own, because I had to check the books in the library back in sometime soon, within a few weeks, so I had to read those first, priorities. So now I'm living in a time where my libraries are not open yet. I know I'm not the only one, but it's a little rough, because I'm not the only one who said this, but in order to pick books for this challenge, I had to go within my own home library or buy a few things. I did buy one thing, actually 2 things recently. But anyway, 3 things. Yes. And so that was wonderful. That started another, whirlwind of buying things that I still have not changed. I started buying books, and I think with that same paycheck, I also started buying loose tea. So, man, I've changed in so many ways, but in some ways, I'm almost exactly the same person, give or take a few pounds. All right, so Lady Susan will be my choice. Okay. Don't worry, I will not quiz you on my experiences with book buying, but let's get into number 3. We're 3 out of 7. Read a nonfiction work about Jane Austen or her time. So my first thought had been to read a recent purchase of mine that I got online with, an unmentionable book buying site. And that was, I'll tell you, because they put those crazy dots on things. Anyway, actually it matches the book. Jane Austen, The Secret Radical by Helena Kelly. This was my first thought to read it. But then, after getting it, I don't know why I didn't read reviews first, because I'm a little nuts. It was only a couple bucks, so I don't feel so bad. I saw reviews, and there was a lot of negative reviews. A lot of negative reviews about this book. And the way the writer asserts certain things that were just theories and whatever as fact. So I don't plan to pick this one up as my main nonfiction book about Jane Austen or her time. This may be like an August read or something. Like when I read What Matters in Jane Austen, whatever it's called. I forgot exactly. I read that in August last year. Having just read some of Jane Austen's books, it was more pleasurable that way. This may be less pleasurable, but hate reading can be fun, so we'll see. But the book I really intend to read is one that Katie from Books and Things actually showed, and I think she's also reading this, but she just got it recently, and I saw it in her haul, and I was like, I want this book. So I bought it, and I got a really good deal on it on a used online site. And that is Jane Austen, the Banker's Sister by E. J. Clary. This is not just about, not just about Jane Austen, but her brother Henry. So it's going to get into finance, which isn't really my thing, but still, I think he's one of the most interesting of the brothers. His wife was one of the most interesting of her relatives. Yes, they were related. That's how things went back in those days, but a whole bunch of stuff, French Revolution related things. So that could be really cool. And he was such a cheerleader of Jane Austen and her writing. So hopefully I'll like it. And if I don't, then I get to hate read it. You know what? Anyway, so that is number 3. Number 4, read a retelling of a Jane Austen book. I had hoped to read Recipe for Persuasion by Sonali Dev, because I had won the book on an early reviewer's like an ARC months ago. But when I got the email that I had won this book, which I was very excited about, I realized that the address I had for the book was my office address. So I quickly changed it, but they may have sent it to my office and I never received it, or they just or whatever. Maybe it got lost in the mail. We don't know. I've been doing well with getting things in the mail that I've ordered. But I don't know. So I sadly do not have this book. It is obviously based on Persuasion, which is my favorite book of Jane Austen's, basically. And I would have liked to have read it. It looked a little bit sad, though. It's sad. Something about a chef whose father committed suicide. That kind of sounds depressing, but I could still probably enjoy that anyway. But I liked Kelowna Ho, and that was sad. Bollywood reference there. Speaking of Bollywood, but anyway, no, not really speaking of Bollywood. But no, I'm not going to. Actually, maybe I will. I'm going off into a tangent here. Going back, okay. We're not on that discussion yet. Where are we? We are the retelling. Yes. I am probably going to read Pemberley Shades by D.A. Bonavia Hunt, which is one of the first, not the first, but I think it's like the second retelling, sequel, etc. of Pride and Prejudice. Of Pride and Prejudice. So 1949, that's a while ago. You could call it a classic, but it's really not. I think I like it. I like the idea of it. Hopefully I will like it. It's supposed to be a little bit gothic, but not too much so. And I got it at Book Off, my beloved Book Off, for $1. So even if it's bad, it was $1 at Book Off. And it's pristine. So, and I just like the shape of this book. Isn't it just kind of nice? Anyway. And number 5. Read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen. Now, if this fails, I can always fall back to just reading a poem or two by a contemporary of Jane Austen's. But I am going to be a little ambitious and finally get back to trying to read this I got. Oh, anyway. This is hilarious. I got this book in the old New York Public Library book sales, which is my other, I miss this so much. Great deals on all kinds of books. This book was apparently 75 cents. Somebody wrote what looks like lottery numbers in here, and it really looks like my father's handwriting, strangely enough, but it's not. But this is The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. I have been trying to read this for so many years, and somehow I just can't seem to. So let's see if I can. If I can't, I will not kick myself. It doesn't, but we shall try. Number 6, watch a direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book. I'm going to try Emma, the recent one, 2020. If I don't feel like, I think it's still on rental on Amazon Prime. If I feel cheap and don't feel like renting it, then I will watch one of my other favorites like Pride and Prejudice from 1995. Who knows? That I'm kind of I'm leaving to mood the films, the movies, the TV shows, whatever. The YouTube videos, apparently. There are so many to choose from. I think I'm just going to go by what I'm in the mood for. I'll probably watch more than one, depending. And then the last one is watch a modern screen adaptation / retelling of a Jane Austen book. I'll probably try Clueless because it is also an Emma retelling, and I have seen it before. I haven't seen it in a while, and it might be nice to do a little bit of 90s nostalgia, as I've been doing a lot in this video, haven't I? With my 1993 this, 1993 that. But that, the 90s were the time where they were bringing back so many great Jane Austen stories that got a whole new generation into Jane Austen. That is a big deal. And though they've done so in the mid-2000, whatever you call that decade, and since they've done more, that was just like a big thing. There were retellings in the 70s and 80s, but there's nothing like the 90s was. Fight me. But, and this is where I was about to talk about Bollywood, there was a story, I think it was around 2003-ish, I could be wrong, called Bride and Prejudice. I have not watched it in years. And yeah, it was obviously a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but with like dancing and music and everything. And I was like seriously into Bollywood back then. I still like it, but not I'm not as into it as I used to be. Like, I don't really watch any of the new things anymore, but I could tell you a lot about the turn of the century Bollywood movies. And, you know, not because I'm an expert, just because there was a lot of that. And it was such a fun movie. And I can't believe I haven't watched it recently. So maybe I'll do that one. Or maybe I'll do both. We'll see. Anything is possible. This is what I love about Jane Austen July. So here's a few other books that I could read that somehow fit into categories a little bit. But I probably, like, I want to also, I mean, first of all, I want to read the ones that I just mentioned. Kind of like cat hair or something just went flying. But, you know, and that probably will be enough. And there are other books that I will probably not get into in a TBR anytime soon because I just don't want to tie myself down any more than I already have that are not Jane Austen July related. So we'll see what I read in July otherwise. But here are some other books that if I somehow find time, they're somehow related a little bit, but not all entirely. This is a book that I bought recently. And it's so small that I might just end up reading it. And that's Camp Austen, My Life as an Accidental Jane Austen Superfan by Ted Scheinman. I think it's exactly what it says here. And it is so small that even if I just ripped right through it, it really wouldn't take up a lot of my time. And then this is a book I read a while back. And it was just, you know, it's like when you go onto like a Goodreads read-along group or something like that, or if you're in a book club, sometimes it's just fun to read with people, you know, who are reading Jane Austen as well, even if they've done so years ago. And Two Guys Read Jane Austen by Steve Chandler and Terrence N. Hill, authors of Two Guys Read Moby Dick and Two Guys Read the Obituaries. Oh, really? Why have I not read those? I mean, I've never read Moby Dick, and I probably never will. But Two Guys Read the Obituaries. That sounds amazing. Morbid, but amazing. I have been in the habit of reading obituaries over the years, so yeah, I'm a little bit dark that way. And this was basically two men, like what it says in the package, two men who were writing to each other on email mostly, I think, while they were reading books by Jane Austen. So this could be a fun reread if I have time. This is a book that I actually started. Let's see, I got up to chapter 3, page 35. This was The Mistress of Longbourn by Jan Roland, and it's a Pride and Prejudice variation. It's kind of an alternate universe retelling, wherein, and this is kind of sad, this is why I may not want to read this time around, but it is right before the story of Pride and Prejudice starts, apparently. There's a big plague, disease, sickness that rips through the town, you know, where Longbourn is and Meryton and all that area, and wipes out the Bennet family, aside from Elizabeth and Kitty. And, of all people, right? And somehow they do some legal finagling, and Elizabeth manages to inherit Longbourn herself instead of Mr. Collins. So that's all I know from the beginning. And it just gets into, you know, Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley come into town with, you know, their other folks. And I had only gotten up to the part where she met Mr. Darcy, and it was a completely different scenario. So it would be cool, but I don't know if I'll have time or energy to read that. And this is probably kind of unrelated, and I got this also on a certain website, and it came a little bit ripped back, which made me mad, but it was still very affordable, so let's not split hairs. This takes place actually in mostly in the United States, but it is of Jane Austen's time, and I am trying to read more about this time period right now. I don't know why. Revolutionary Brothers by Tom Chafin? Who knows? Thomas Jefferson, the Marquis de Lafayette, and the friendship that helped forge two nations. So, I mean, that was during the time of Jane Austen's youth, or youngitude. They were very, you know, affected by that in a lot of different ways, you know. And I'm still trying to do my little research on Thomas Jefferson of my two minds. Yeah, he is not someone I approve of in many ways, but that is for another time. So that is my Jane Austen TBR, to be watched, to be partaking in. I hope you've enjoyed. If you I will try to find your videos if you make videos about Jane Austen July. And if not, please comment down below what you plan to read, if you plan to read anything of Jane Austen's. So this is it. This is Catherine, Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea, book, and Jane Austen filled day and month. Goodbye.